We've got the highlights and lowlights of the VP debate for you today. And internationally recognized Dr. Robert Malone is bringing the heat in the war against the New World Order. No time to waste. I'm Kristi Leigh, bringing you the counter narrative. You know, I don't think my guest would mind me saying this, that next to every great man is a great woman, maybe even better woman sometimes. And Dr. Robert Malone is on standby to tell us how he and his great woman, Jill, have teamed up against the globalists. But first, we must acknowledge last night, right? We must acknowledge the waltz wallop by Vance with a VP debate recap. Let me start with the most compelling takeaway. My 11-month-old baby, who just mastered waving, stopped and waved at JD Vance on the screen. She did not do the same for Tim Walz. So I'm just saying, even the most innocent among us can tell what's going on. But in all seriousness, I was really impressed with how much more polite and kind the VP contenders were with each other, in stark contrast to the bitter, smug, can I say hags? No, we'll call them wing women for Walz, posing as moderators. Another 3-on-1 debate from the corporate-controlled regime media. Even left-wing Politico hinted at this, posting, CBS News said moderators wouldn't point out or correct VP candidates' inaccurate statements tonight, but moderators have so far snuck in fact checks on a couple of Vance's statements. Oh, that's just so weird. But when JD tried to fact check the fact checkers, here's what happened.
That's Geraldo.
Margaret, but thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Thank you, Senator.
Facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
Well, there you have it. And look, Vance was right. Okay? There's nuance to it. But the bigger problem is why he was moved on. We've got so much to get to. This says who? You know what I mean? Like, what is the schedule here? So you have a list of topics? That's not what it's about. It's about how the American people can access these two men and the two theories and the narratives, and you've got to let them have their speak, because now you created a story where you're the problem, which...
Senator, you're making way too much sense. You're making way too many good points. We can't have that. We have to move on. There's so much to get to. I'm impressed with Cuomo lately. I'm not going to hold back on saying that. I mean, I don't know what his motivations are, but he does seem to have turned a leaf. It would be nice if he apologized for his vicious attacks on the unvaxxed, but at least he can point out what we saw happening. Another 3-on-1 debate. Charlie Kirk shared this on X. Bloodbath. Look how the poly market took a dive betting on a Waltz loss. In a shocking admission, even CNN concedes Vance won. Watch.
I think there was a clear lack of preparation and execution here on Walz's part.
I think actually it's the opposite. I think he had too much preparation.
Maybe,
yeah. He had so many lines that he was clearly trying to say that he didn't listen and said when J.D. Vance said one of the many things he really hit Kamala Harris on, not Tim Walz, but Kamala Harris, he didn't respond because he clearly had things in his mind. I think the lack of interviews that he has done with national media, with local media, it showed. He needed more reps.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, J.D. Vance is much more experienced at this, at public speaking, at defending himself, at pivoting.
Tim Walz, he just knows too much. He couldn't keep up with all that's going on in his mind. At least she acknowledged the media shutout that Harris and Walz have become accustomed to. Again, despite all CBS did to prop up Tampon Tim, he won. Walz won, or excuse me, Vance won. He got no fact checks, Walz, even though repeatedly lying about immigration. Walz said illegal border crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But just look at this chart. It's pretty clear the explosion of crossings under Biden-Harris. So it's just alarming how many lies they're able to get away with these bias networks. They're clearly in the tank for their preferred candidate. Walz also lied about his radical abortion stance in his state, saying his law doesn't allow abortion in the 9th month. But the reality is his law has no limits based on gestation, even barbarically leaving babies to die. Watch.
To me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best.
He just outright denies what people can look up the law, knowing that most people won't look up the law. I mean, that's the bottom line. He just lies through his teeth. But here's perhaps the strangest moment in the debate for Walz. Watch this.
So I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to, so I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to.
What? Friends with school shooters? Yet this man calls Vance weird. Vance also easily owned Walz on the economy. Watch this.
So appreciate that. So if you notice what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
Now, the rest of this show is all for Dr. Robert Malone. But to finish out this block, would love to get his take on the debate. I just read his Substack on his take, but it's so many great insights there. So, Dr. Malone, I'm going to give you a proper introduction in the next block, although I don't think you need one. Many know who you are by now. But I saw you engaged in the debate as well last night, keyboard warrior like myself. So, what were your major takeaways?
So I found it fascinating that Tim Walz had difficulty assembling a clear, logical line in his responses. What we ended up with was something akin to the Kamala Harris word salad, where he was just throwing out kind of random ideas. Now, one of the things that you didn't cover, probably out of your gracious heart, was the outright lie that Walz got caught on regarding Tiananmen and his atrocious response to that. I mean, if you want to assert that this person lies, then that is exhibit number one. Clearly he has done so, and he has done so repeatedly and intentionally. This is essentially a form of stolen valor. I was at Tiananmen Square when in fact he wasn't. And it's something that he's repeated again and again. He was outclassed all the way through. There's no question. I read one comment that Tim Walz is just not up to this level of American politics. He's fine in his governor's position, in his Midwestern state, interacting with farmers, bless his heart, and the moderate challenges which his state faces in terms of urban decay, the success and well-spoken, the success of the Mayo Clinic and healthcare provision, but again and again and again, Vance outclassed him and outthought him and outspoke him. Vance, as we mentioned in the Substack, is presidential. Tim Walz, I think it's getting time for retirement. He came across as very troll-like, mottled face. The Jill's comment was that this evoked the Kennedy versus Nixon debates. The graphics alone, the imagery of the two side by side was striking. Vance with these piercing blue eyes, and he's been characterized as being obese, crazy, all kinds of pejoratives in corporate media. And clearly he is fit as a fiddle and intellectually sharp as a pin. Just to make the point, not to diss Bobby Kennedy or Tulsi Gabbard, there is no way that either of those two could have pulled off what J.D. Vance just did. We see the ascendancy of somebody that truly is from Hillfolk, who is from Appalachia, who is self-made in many respects, has managed to make it up the academic ladder, graduate from major universities, enter the world stage, and his ability to fashion a narrative and to counter the narrative being promoted was just stunning, fascinating. And our comment was that this man represents the future of MAGA. What's also striking to me is think about the two presidential candidates. They're making their first key decision, perhaps one of their most important decisions. Who are they going to live with over the next 4 years? Who are they going to anoint? Who are they going to set up as their successor? Who are they going to bring on as their counselor, this vice president candidate? Are they just going to use it as a way to garner? Are they going to pull off a selection of a really high quality, high value partner? My understanding is it's Don Jr. that pushed J.D. Vance. And if that's the case, then good on him, because clearly Mr. Vance, with this incredible hero's journey story that he has, combined with his eloquence, his intellectual agility, his physical presence, this is a future president.
Yeah, and they like to, especially in light of Vance's clear win, they like to downplay the effectiveness or the how a VP debate will play into the election. But I have to say, from a woman's perspective, that this, I feel like, was a very meaningful debate and perception because I was one that was not a fan of the choice. I thought he almost came across as too polished, and I was like, oh great, is he gonna be another Rhino? It was almost like too polished for me when he came on the scene, and I wasn't wild about the choice. But in seeing last night's debate, I found him very authentic, endearing. When he was kind to Walz, it didn't come across as condescending or
Yes.
Politician-like, if you will. It came off as truly authentic. And so he really impressed me. And I got to say, when I watched the Trump and Kamala debate, I was very frustrated. I was like pulling my hair out, like, why, Trump, why aren't you saying this? Why aren't you getting him on this? And I didn't have to go through that with this debate because he was so sharp as a tack. Now, the lying mainstream media is saying, oh, well, it's just because he has more reps, but I feel like that's an unfair take as well, because as you said, Governor Walz has been at this politics game a lot longer. And although he's been evading interviews, he has more of the politician experience. We forget, I think, because J.D. Vance is so eloquent in his speaking and debate style, that he's a newbie at this relatively,
Yeah. He's a real powerhouse, and let's see how it goes. But another thing that I found fascinating was that, as you point out, without any evidence of subterfuge, he did an excellent job supporting President Trump again and again and again. If our take over here, Jill and myself, is that Mr. Vance may have just won Mr. Trump the presidency. I think this was really a definitive debate in a much more substantial way than, as you point out, that fiasco of 3-on-1 with Trump and Harris and what was it, ABC News. So let's see how the polls go. There aren't that many undecided voters. The key, you mentioned your reaction as a woman and as a mother. And that's the key constituency right now. That is what's going to swing Pennsylvania one way or the other. That's what's going to really move these swing states, is once again the mama bears, the mothers, the women who are looking at Trump a little bit askance. They're very awake and alert to the issue of reproductive rights and women's freedom to choose. And I agree that what they saw was a remarkably empathetic intellectual politician that was able to project a clear narrative, counter the narrative very effectively that was being promoted by the interviewers. And I come back that this was a clear display that J.D. Vance is a potential future presidential candidate, but that he's quite willing to serve his time, serve his president, basically as an internship for future power. That if Trump wins, J.D. Vance is going to come out of this as a major threat to the bicoastal elite and to the deep state. There's no question in my mind about it.
So to that end, and to wrap up this block, prayers go up to the candidates who are that existential threat. We need to continue to pray for them and their protection, and that the enemy's efforts to steal will be subverted. But up next, we have the latest truth bomb book from you and your wife that we're going to talk about and dive into. But first, we need to hear from those that make this show possible. So quick break, and we'll be back with Dr. Malone after this.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
Welcome back. Just want to remind you that it is tonight. Tonight is when I am on the hot seat, and exclusive to Patriot Defenders. If you are a Patriot.tv subscriber, you can join in and ask me anything tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you just go to Patriot.tv, you will see where you need to register, and you can register for that. If you are not a subscriber and you just want a one-time ticket, that is okay too. But if you want to chat about the debate, ask me anything, I'm happy to have that conversation ready to go tonight. So make sure you register and join me this evening. All right, the book, Psywar, Enforcing the New World Order. That is the title of the latest book from Dr. Robert Malone and his wife, Dr. Jill Glasspool Malone. Dr. Malone is an internationally recognized scientist, physician, author, and political commentator. He is the original inventor of mRNA vaccination and DNA vaccination as technology platforms, and holds numerous fundamental domestic and foreign patents. He is also president of the Malone Institute, whose mission is to bring back integrity to government, the biological sciences, and medicine. His wife, Dr. Jill, is a scientist, regulatory specialist, and author. She has been a co-founder of a number of biotech companies, 2 of which have gone to IPO and have held positions in biotechnology industry, and academia, among so many other things. We need to actually save time to talk to Dr. Malone. So welcome, Dr. Malone. So honored to have you on with me again. It's been a long journey for us. I'm so proud of you, honored to call you a friend, and excited to hear about your next initiative with your wife.
Thanks, Kristi. And just to say it, I've been really grateful for your support and friendship, and to consider you a colleague and fellow warrior in what we've all been through over the last 4 years. I'll never forget your interview right after the Atlantic Monthly attack article that came out against me. It was really incredibly helpful at a time when I felt like I was being unjustly beaten. You stepped in and pointed out the poor quality of the article and its obvious biases, and did so very publicly and very promptly, and I'll never forget that. So here we have a book that, go ahead.
No, I just said it's well deserved. I mean, it was very easy to rip that article apart, so don't give me too much credit. But go ahead, let's talk about this book.
So the key question is, why would a physician scientist and a scientist with a background in regulatory affairs and public affairs put out a book about psychological warfare? And why are we writing this? Why are we publishing this? The book represents our response to what we've been subjected to, and the paradox that we've encountered of the the psychological warfare that has been deployed against all of us over the last 4 years, not just me. And I certainly haven't sustained anything like what Donald Trump has sustained in terms of the attacks, false narratives, censorship, gaslighting, etc. But for me, one of my core defense mechanisms is try to intellectualize or comprehend things that I encounter in the world. And in the case of the attacks that I've sustained, both on social media and in the press, it's been a challenge for me to make sense out of all this, as it has been for many of us, to understand what's going on, who's behind it, what their agendas are, what is the technology that's being deployed. And it's evolved during the last 4 years. So the book represents that journey that originally came out in a serialized version on Substack, and then was reassembled, rewritten, and restructured as this book. And it's been 2 years in the making. Our intention is that this will arm people. It will give them the ability to better understand what they are seeing and experiencing, in the hopes that it will make them more resistant to it. We could say more immune. You could say this is a book that is a vaccine to protect you from the psychological warfare that's being deployed against you. And it has many, many different facets and manifestations. All of this wraps up into the new doctrine of fifth generation warfare that NATO calls hybrid warfare. And what we've all experienced is the advanced psychological manipulation methods that were developed by the US military, largely in close cooperation with MI5, MI6, and the British military, the 77th Brigade, in the context of NATO operations. And this was all developed ostensibly originally to give us more of an advantage against the Taliban, against Al-Qaeda, because we lose fifth generation warfare engagements again and again and again, Vietnam being a notable early example. And so they've developed this tech, but then in an incremental way, they've decided that these military units and government units should begin to deploy this technology against their own citizens. And I can tell you that I've spoken to many retired people from Psywar brigades and other operations that are proper pissed off to see the stuff that they contributed to the development of turned against their own citizens. Kristi, I make the point that this tech is so powerful. It's aimed to completely control everything that you think, believe, feel. All the information that you encounter is controlled now, especially on social media and in corporate media, as we can see in this election. And when a government believes that it's acceptable to deploy these techniques and technologies and to censor and propagandize continuously, then the whole idea of sovereignty, free agency, and the social agreement that exists between the citizens, the governed, and the governing groups becomes completely obsolete. Because if you take surveillance capitalism, which is the business model of the technology sector now, which is abstracting your metadata, or I argue they're stealing part of your soul and then refashioning that as behavioral futures and selling it repeatedly, that becomes the input vector for this new psychological warfare technology, which then loops back and seeks to influence everything that you hear, feel, believe, and all information that you encounter, so that people, whether or not they realize it, they aren't really able to freely think, to independently assess information, because they are being manipulated intentionally, constantly. And you talk about this when you focus on corporate media, and we just did in that segment a moment ago, and also in your prior discussions and mine regarding what happened between Trump and Harris and the news broadcasters that ganged up on Trump. But we see it on a daily basis. We are subjected to a bombardment of manipulations intended to cause us to think and act in certain ways. And this has now become normalized. We have to stop this, or we truly have lost democracy, because we're not able to think independently anymore. And if you think that because you're intelligent or you're highly educated, you're more resistant to this, you're fooling yourself, because it's the highly intelligent, highly educated groups that are the most susceptible to this type of technology. It's the physicals, folks that are out there working with their hands, doing things, even physicians to some extent, but people that are actually doing things in the real world that are resistant to it. It's the virtuals, these people that live in the finance sector, the technology sector, broadcasting, that are decoupled from actual physical reality, that are the most susceptible to this.
Yeah, and to that end, I think that what's most chilling about all of this is that I think we would recognize a lot of this Psywar as having been subtle at first, and kind of things that were done in the darkness or the shadows, and they were hoping we wouldn't notice, let's say. And then it became so aggressive that it radicalized, you could say, people like you and I, who maybe were like suspicious of some things and knew that some things were wrong, but didn't ever realize just how bad it was. But now it's alarming. And again, like I said, chilling, that it's become so brazen. They are broadcasting what they want to do. We just had John Kerry say that if Democrats, or essentially said, if Democrats win, that they can change the Constitution and fix the First Amendment to attack disinformation. I mean, they want to redefine, of course, reimagine, they love that word, our Constitution. Hillary Clinton was just talking about that. I mean, they're all on the same page, brazenly shouting it out to everyone that they intend to take our rights, our fundamental rights away. What do you make of that shift of, I mean, is my perception right? Is it a shift from they were doing some of these things subtly and now they're being brazen about it? Or does it just seem that way because we have woken up, I guess?
Yeah, we talk about this in the opening chapter, in which we provide a brief history of modern Psywar and track back to the seminal event of the first presidential coup, the assassination of Kennedy. And and the subsequent media and information manipulation that occurred and continues to occur. Fortunately now Donald Trump seems to have got religion. And although he promised previously in his prior administration that he would release those documents, it sounds like he is really committed to that now and recognizes the importance of coming clean. And there's now discussions about holding another church commission, another opportunity to really re-examine what has been deployed in the context of the assassinations of both Kennedys and Martin Luther King, as well as what's been deployed in terms of Operation Mockingbird, the role of the CIA and now Homeland Security and CISA in manipulating information and manipulating the American public. I agree that there has been an incrementalism, but it might, as you point out, it might well be that it's always been there, but it has been a little more undercover, and the overt lying in COVID has made it much more transparent. And now you mentioned John Kerry, and I quoted him at the outset of my recent brief speech at the Rescue the Republic rally in DC last Sunday, and read those quotes. They're stunning, but even more stunning is that he was saying this in the context of the World Economic Forum. So when he speaks of we, he's not talking about the Democratic Party. He's talking about the Democratic Party as one arm of the globalist agenda of the World Economic Forum. If you unpack his language there is an implicit linkage between the agenda of the WEF, which is to say the agenda of the United Nations, and corporatists in general, and the Democrat Party, as you point out. I mean, it's now out in the open. Some people think this is a sign of fear and desperation, that they are being more transparent. And by the way, it is one of the sins in fifth generation warfare is what you don't do. You intentionally avoid allowing or enabling those that are being subjected to this technology to know who's doing it to them. The whole question of who's the puppet master. This is increasingly out in the open now. We talk about this extensively, particularly in the last part of the book, about the New World Order, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, corporatism, the alliance or treaty or arrangements that exist between the WEF and the UN, and the new power structure that is intended to be imposed for global control, in which nation states are put at the bottom of the pyramid. And then we have an unelected United Nations partnered with an unelected World Economic Forum and its corporatist allies as the operational arm for administering this new world government. And then sitting on top of that are these global public-private partnerships, which set the agendas, provide the capital, et cetera, and basically guide where the initiatives and agendas are going to be. And of course, we can see again and again that these almost always have a corporatist aspect. For instance, with climate change and the assertion that it is human anthropomorphic CO2 production that is driving this. It was repeated again in the debate yesterday by the press. That's a false narrative, but it serves these corporate interests that are busy selling green technology, that are busy imposing through the World Bank green technology on Africa and the developing world, insisting that they must use green technology for their energy needs, as opposed to, for instance, Africa has abundant natural gas resources, and that would solve their energy problems and really allow themselves to lift themselves up. But they can't get capital for the necessary infrastructure because the World Bank and associated structures won't allow them to gain access to capital unless for energy development, unless it's tied to green technology, which is being sold to them by the China and by various corporate interests that are allied with the World Economic Forum. So that's how the game is being played. It's the same old scene, but with a lot more power and capability now, in large part because of the reach of the internet and its pervasive nature.
Now, you mentioned something earlier in what you were saying about that in fifth generation warfare, they're going kind of against their own rules and letting you know who the players are. One thing that I have thought on is again, I just can continue to use that word brazen because it's just, excuse me, it's so in your face, all of these things that they're doing. Like even when it comes to election integrity, they don't even try and hide it anymore, that they don't want truth and transparency. There's lawsuits against hand counts. There's lawsuits against keeping illegals off the voter rolls.
Yes.
I mean, to vote against the SAVE Act. I mean, it's in your face. No, we want to cheat, so we're not going to support these measures. It's so in your face, and you know, it's so again brazen. What they're doing to us, that it makes me feel like, oh, is that an element of this Psywar? Is they're trying to break us. They're trying to make us so upset, so ticked off, that they're trying to poke the bear as to such that something big does happen, and then they can use that to exert control. Do you think that there's any possibility that that's why they're making this exception?
Well, part of the power play is to project inevitability, which is essentially what you're saying, that they believe that by asserting their dominance, that's kind of what this is about. They're asserting that they are so dominant that they can be very open and transparent and rather overt in their actions and in their agendas. They're not hiding it. They're not hiding the underlying socialism that drives this new Pact for the Future and Agenda 2030, for instance. The Director General of the United Nations used to be head of the Socialist International. Before that, he was head of the Socialist Party in Portugal. He was the Prime Minister in Portugal as a socialist. And he basically grew up during the Portuguese Revolution against Salazar as a socialist, which was incredibly disruptive for Portuguese society and economy, etc. It was a full-on revolution. And that's where these people come from. They're unabashed socialists, and they feel like that. It appears from their comments and their openness about these things, they believe that they represent the future. They believe that it's acceptable to unilaterally impose their philosophies, their political philosophies, their management practices, their agendas on the rest of the world. As the Director General of the UN said the other day in written comments in support of this Pact for the Future, he said, "We have the best plans." Now, those plans are untested, and we've seen the nature of those plans and whether or not they're effective, for instance, with ESG and DEI. Even BlackRock now is turning its back. Larry Fink is no longer a fan of DEI because it damages profitability. It's not consistent with corporate responsibility to shareholders and otherwise. And so we also saw their best plans in the deployment of many falsehoods and gross mismanagement of the COVID crisis. But these plans have not been tested in the field. We don't actually have any evidence for this. They just have propaganda and these feel-good assertions. And what they're driving towards is a centralized one world government modeled on the European Union. That's what the core model is, in which the leadership of the European Union is all appointed. The European Council and the overall leader, Ursula von Leyen, are all appointed. They're not elected. And that's the structure that they want to impose for this one world government that will be an alliance between the World Economic Forum, the corporatists, and the United Nations, the socialists. Now, Benito Mussolini had a word for this fusion between government and corporatism. He called it fascism. The left has bastardized the term fascism to imply that it has meaning in the context of those of us that are on the right or center right. But that's a falsehood. That's another twisting of language, of words, redefining words. The truth is that fascism has almost always come from the left and from socialism working together with corporatist interests. And that's what we see with their new one world order. So John Kerry is sitting there on his perch at the World Economic Forum, pontificating, overtly asserting that the Democratic Party, by implication, is a branch of this new one world government that represents this fusion between the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. And he's not apologetic about it. He's basically saying that we need an election landslide in the United States so we can hammer this down and stop. Remember, what is misinformation, this horrible thing that he wants to stop? Misinformation is any information which differs from the approved narrative. What they're saying, if you unpack it, is they want to be able to launch an approved narrative about whatever the topic is, and then anybody who dissents from that, whether it's about the climate, whether it's about public health, whether it's about public policy, will be censored and will be deplatformed, subject to social credit score issues. And behind this, remember, is the broad-based agreement that we will have digital IDs and vaccine passports, and that will migrate towards central bank digital currency, a system that is really quite well advanced globally right now, and that this social credit system and digital ID system will all be managed through the implementation of central bank digital currency controlled by the Bank of International Settlements. And Kristi, what's really, if you unpack all of this, at least from the standpoint of those of us like myself that are fans of Austrian school economics and the Mises Institute, what's behind this is solving some problems with fiat currency, in which you get an imbalance, trade imbalance between different nation states, and that creates some problems. By going to central bank digital currency, this is going to allow them to further exploit the benefits for government of fiat currency and continue to use a much more highly managed inflation in order to capitalize wars and capitalize the welfare state. That's really what's behind this now.
Yeah, and to that end, I want to make sure that we hit the point home. We do need to take another break, but when we return, I want to talk about the perhaps unintended consequences of their aggressive fifth generation warfare push. Interestingly, all the observations I've noticed of never before thought of bedfellows, people that are coming together against this machine.
Tulsi and Bobby.
Excuse me. And yeah, exactly. But I want to dig deeper into that. Also hear about your trip to Japan, and again, a final push on this excellent book that you have authored with your wife. But we'll have all that on the other side. We got to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
I don't know about you, but I have to have that cup of coffee in the morning. And Kingdom Cup is mold-free, it is pesticide-free, and it is organic. It's got this flavor that is delicious. You don't even have to put cream or sweetener in it.
Why did we go with the bean form, the whole bean? Because ultimately the powder form is the one that gathers the most moisture. And that means the more potential mold development. This is actually organic, mold-free, certified. That's important because ultimately people drink coffee. It's cultural. And so we tried to meet the culture where it is and create a healthy alternative.
Make the healthy choice for you and your family. Try mold-free, pesticide-free, and it's organic. Delicious Kingdom Cup coffee. And it's available now at the Patriot TV store. Go to patriot.tv and click on store. You'll find Kingdom Cup coffee in the health and wellness section. Order Kingdom Cup coffee at the Patriot TV store now.
Welcome back. We've been talking to Dr. Robert Malone, who is authored a new book, Psywar, with his wife, and we're going to be diving back into that real quick. But just a quick reminder with these port strikes, with the natural disasters, with what we're all expecting to be chaos for Election Day, it's important to remember to be prepared. And one way you can do that is stock up on shelf-stable beef. You can get your beef at klbeef.com. These are ranchers in Texas, veteran-owned, and there are Dr. Robert Malone will be happy to hear this. No mRNA shots in this beef whatsoever. And it is, like I said, shelf stable, not beef jerky, not beef crumbles, premium cuts of beef that you can have when you need it. We need that protein to continue the fight when the impending disaster occurs. Right now, you can have a huge discount, Stock Up 35. This is in light of everything that's going on. So use promo code Stock Up 35 at klbeef.com for the highest discount on this delicious shelf-stable beef. All right, we are going to go right back to Dr. Robert Malone. And so, again, proud of you and your wife for just powering ahead. And, you know, we've talked about a lot of the negative things that have happened. So I want to tie all this up with hope. And one of the things that give me hope is the, I think, unintended consequences of their aggressive action against we the people. You have interesting bedfellows, like you said, RFK Jr. and Trump, finally coming together, as well as so many others. There's been a change of tide. Now you've got Robert Redfield, former CDC director, coming out in support. I mean, this is some exciting things that are happening, right?
Well, you forgot Elon Musk. Everybody's overlooking Elon, but that's the big boy. That's the big dog in all this. And far more than Bobby or Tulsi or Bob or anybody really, when you kind of look at it. What an amazing journey for this entrepreneur from South Africa to become really one of the great hopes of the world for freedom. But I noticed that he's even being forced to compromise in Brazil. So it certainly has been a journey. And what, in terms of a positive message, and the book seeks, just like with the prior one, to end on a positive note and talk about, in particular, what you can do. What can you do to help protect and enable a better future for yourself and your children? And I hearken back to the early thing that I spoke about that caused Google to lose its cookies, which is mass formation or mass formation psychosis, the hypothesis of Matthias Desmet, in which Matthias hypothesizes that the underpinning, and of course this is based on Hannah Arendt's work in the 20th century, the underpinning enablement for totalitarianism is the fragmentation of the individual from society. When we all get split off into separate individuals, and of course this is really accelerated by psychological warfare, in which you find yourself in a terrain that you can't trust anybody and you don't know what is true, this fragments society almost completely. And this is the precursor to enabling totalitarianism. So what can we do about it? You have to build local community. You have to invest in your church, in your neighbors, in your family, in your extended relationships. You have to allow yourself to take the time to connect with real people in the real world. And that's how we get through this. It may well be, if Kamala Harris wins, if we have a Harris-Walz future, which is exactly what the globalists want, that things are going to get a little bit tough. As Michael Flynn famously said, things are bad now, they're going to get worse, and we win in the end, referring to biblical prophecy. But I think that the positive note here is, number one, remember that we're much more than just a mind. This is the flaw in the logic of dominance of artificial intelligence and the future of human AI in robotic fusion. This transhuman future is all about thinking that what defines us as humans is our mind and our cognitive function. But it's not. It's our heart. It's our souls. It's those things that drive us that was, by the way, on display with J.D. Vance so effectively. People weren't really reacting to him as much about his intellectual prowess. They were reacting because he reached out to Mr. Walls and acted like a human being, like an empathetic human being, not like a robot, not like some prepped version of talking points. And that's where we all got to get to. We have to remember that what makes us human is not just cognition, but it's our heart and soul. And we need to emphasize that a lot more because that's something that artificial intelligence can't emulate. It's what makes us different. And it's what will allow us to tunnel through into a better future, no matter what comes at us. Yes, we need to prep. I love the idea of freeze-dried steaks, but
yes, kobeef.com. But I just want to hit home. Psywar, it officially comes out October 8th, but you want to order on Amazon. Make sure that you do that so that it shows up on the charts there on Amazon. I only have a couple minutes left, Dr. Malone, and I really wanted to hit on your trip to Japan, which I'm sure you can't give me in a couple minutes, but what was your major takeaway from having to go to Tokyo and then immediately to rescue the Republic on the National Mall? What's your major takeaway from that?
My major take is that being time shifted by 12 hours is wicked hard to recover from when you're 65 years old. But beyond that, Japan is being used as a test country, as guinea pigs, in the deployment of a new RNA technology, self-replicating RNA vaccines for COVID. And once again, this has been jammed through the Japanese regulatory authority with very little non-clinical testing. They haven't assessed whether or not there's any shedding. They haven't assessed whether or not this will be infectious to third persons. They haven't assessed whether or not it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and I assert it's highly likely to do so. And the Japanese people are well and truly worked up over this. About 20 to 30,000 people came out last Saturday to protest about what's being deployed on them, particularly into the elderly. They want to get it down into the children, but they're going to start with the elders. And in Japan, the elders are particularly protected caste. And there's a lot of unhappiness about what the government is doing. And it's the same old story of government co-optation by pharma. And under an umbrella of U.S., presumably State Department pressure to go along with this. So that's what's going on in Japan. The deployment starts now. And we're now on October 2nd. It began yesterday. And then to come from that to the Rescue the Republic on a short turnaround, I landed at 3:30 and had to go to pre-meetings Saturday night and then all day Sunday. And then a follow-up afterwards when Del Bigtree announced the new super PAC that he's setting up to support the Make America, I think he calls it Healthy Again.
Maha.
Yeah, so we set up a Maha super PAC, and Del is going to run that. But what we saw again was a good, robust turnout on a rainy day in D.C. when the whole southeastern corridor has been shredded by this bloody hurricane. And it's interfered with transportation and everything else. And still, people turned out in large numbers, I think in the range of 20,000 or 30,000. I haven't seen the numbers yet. One of the things that was remarkable, it was an open crowd at the Rescue the Republic rally. It was an open crowd, and there was absolutely no disruption. They call this a dirty crowd. And the park police were stunned. They don't see this. The fact that we didn't have any disruptions, Brett Weinstein darkly warned about neo-Nazis and Proud Boys infiltrating, and that they would likely, if that was the case, be feds. None of that happened.
Good.
It was a really friendly rally with absolutely no violence, no major protesters, no protesters with bullhorns. None of that stuff happened, even though it was open. And huge success. Of course, everybody was quite worried about the security. My comment was, we'll be secure so long as the Secret Service is kept away. But it came off impeccably, and I managed to squeeze out my 3 minutes, and I guess I gave a good talk, I'm told, but then really rallied the troops for Senator Ron Johnson, who followed immediately afterwards, as I said then, as a true patriot and hero.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Dr. Robert Malone, never enough time with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really want to encourage viewers to get your book. There is hope included, which we all need. So get that Psywar book, get it on Amazon. Official release date is October 8th, but you can go there right now and search for it and pre-order. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kristi.
You bet. All right, got to end with the verse of the day. Here it is, Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Now, again, this is from Jeremiah 1:5. It was to the prophet Jeremiah, but it shows the character of God. And if he felt that way about Jeremiah, he feels that way about you. We all have a purpose and a plan in this crazy chaos that we're in. Yes, you have a purpose and a plan. God knew it before you were even formed in the womb, as it says in his word about Jeremiah. Again, same to you. All right, just want to remind you, I'd love for you to join me tonight. Questions and answers, anything. Obviously, that's my locals channel. You can join me there too. But tonight, I want you to join me on Patriot TV. Go to patriot.tv right now and register for the question and answer. Ask me anything starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. Would love to see you there. In the meantime, make sure that you do not forget to share the counter narrative.
Now I'm on the right side.